Hey there, everyone. Welcome back to the channel. My name is Kevin Small with CRPA. Wanted to do kind of a continuation of last week's episode on legislation. We were talking about Senate Bill 252, the Bear Bill that was defeated. But I think it's important sometimes that we not just disclose the facts, but also talk about the context. So I can't really think of anybody better to talk about that with other than CRPA's legislative director. He's also had a lifelong career with the Department of Fish and Wildlife, Roy Griffith. Roy, thanks for being here.
Hey, thanks, Kevin. Thanks for this opportunity. Always a pleasure to
Yeah,
get.
so I mean, we kind of talked last week about Senate Bill 252, what it was meant to do. Kind of weird that it was pulled away the way that it was. But I'm hoping, Roy, that you can kind of just give us a little bit of information on bills like this in the past and how they've come to affect us and why it was so important for us to beat this one down.
Yeah, this bill, Kevin, set a really bad precedent. I mean, this was the first time they went after a mammal in California that we are legally and licensed to purchase a bear tag for. It was a big game animal. That was a big bite of the apple that they've been going after the last couple of years. Lucky for us, it was an extremely misguided piece of legislation. It's a good Senator Weiner, a senator, mind you, from a district and county in California doesn't have one bear or not one bear issue or not one bear harvested, felt it was upon him to change the course of action for all Californians. And in his opening statement says that bears are declining in California due to global warming, yada, yada, yada. No such thing couldn't be further from the truth. Bear populations have almost tripled since the 80s by the department's own estimates. Ever since 2013, when bear hunting with hounds was made unlawful, the department hasn't even met their own science-based quota of 1,700 bears. They've been leaving 500 or more bears on landscape every year since 2013. So do the math. It doesn't take long before those bear populations are going through the roof and causing havoc throughout California in places where they've never been historically. So lucky, just the pretense of the bill, let alone the fact that he was jumping in a pool that is supposed to be completely monitored and protected by two entities. The Constitution of California provides for the power of the legislature appointed the Fish and Game Commission over 150 years ago. And that commission was entrusted in protecting our wildlife and managing our wildlife based on science, not based on emotions and what else somebody else in a little Sacramento County or San Francisco County feels. So that's the main crux how we went after this bill, that they were going after something that was supposed to be regulated on science and regulated by the Fish and Game Commission and the Department of Fish and Wildlife. So yeah, you're right. Earlier you opened saying, his excuse for dumping the bill because of COVID. Really? I mean, we didn't know COVID existed when he introduced that bill, and then a week later. But it wasn't just CRPA, and we're not here to spike a ball today and claim victory. We won a battle, we won a skirmish, but we didn't win the war. They're not going away. This one's going to come back, and it will come back probably a little more thought out and in a little better format. I don't want to, we have to be careful how much we say, because we don't want to tip all of our cards to the antis of how they could possibly do this. But what they tried certainly flew in the face of science, and it flew in the face of everything, like
Well,
most
yeah,
of it.
I think it's interesting too because we've seen certain species of animals go unchecked before. We've seen populations get out of control, and we've seen just how they affect the ecosystem around them. Uh, maybe give us a little bit of insight as to what that would look like with bears, but also if you could touch on, how egregious this actually is. How do these politicians get away with putting these kinds of words into legislation and they go unchecked also? I don't really understand how you can glare in the face of science the way that they've done and just blatantly lie in a piece of legislation. How does this go unchecked?
Let's go with your second question first, because it angers me the most, and then we'll backtrack to the biology of it. It goes unchecked because these folks care about two things, Kevin: getting reelected and making money to get reelected. He can throw in his little world of San Francisco. It doesn't matter how illogical or wrong this bill was, because with his basis of voters, he scored points. You know, he scored all kinds of points on the crazy dial and fly in the face of science and do what they want anyway. And you're right, there's no checks and balances. They can enter a bill to do almost anything. So as much as misguided as this piece of legislation was, in his little world with his little constituents, bing, 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 you know, went the point meter and went the little meter that's gonna, you can fundraise off this thing all day long, you know. So um, yeah, we put him in his place, but he got what he wanted out of it. He got nothing but publicity. He got national wide attention as being the good senator protecting bears in California. So we have to be very careful how much we talk about how we won this one, because we're both, you know, in his little world, he's claiming victories. But you're right, there's no checks and balances other than
Yeah,
what
and
the
I
process
guess
did.
it just kind of feeds into, you know, the understanding that if we really want to see change in this state, we need to replace the people. I mean, that we're going to continue and see this kind of legislation until we change the people, and we're not going to do that until we band together as a community to vote on this principle by itself, which, you know, we've seen plenty of evidence that the Second Amendment community is the largest voting bloc in the state, and that's probably by far. So we need to start voting where we're seeing this legislation, and we can do it if we band together. It's going to take some work. It's going to take some work on the grassroots level, but this can be attained little by little. We can do that throughout the state.
Amen. So backing up to your first question about science and what happens, you know, you said it best. This is we're part of a web of nature. You know, you can't turn back time. There's some of these concepts of unwilding and rewilding and taking man out of the equation. It's been tried in small populations, and different scientific studies have failed miserably in the past all over the world. All kinds of folks thought we can just let nature have its way and go back. It can't happen. Man has changed the world so much. We've eliminated the grizzly bear from California, which was pretty much what kept black bears in their place. You know, we have more black bears now than we did historically, likely before white man got here, because black bears were only, their range was pretty much just the high Sierras and alpine areas. The grizzly bear, it ruled the valleys and the foothills, and the little black bear show her face down here, and they were either eaten or head back to the hills. So that, number one, that we don't have an apex predator to monitor and keep black bear populations in check other than us. Secondly, black bears devastate fawn populations. There are several scientific studies by the department themselves that show upward 70% of fawn mortality is caused by black bears. They're very efficient at harvesting and taking fawns. So they have been a huge factor in the decline of our deer herds in California. Now, like I said, they can take fawns. They're not too efficient at taking adult deer, but here's what they do. It's a fancy term called kleptoparasitism, where it's proven in numerous scientific studies where mountain lion that can and are very efficient harvesters of adult deer take an adult deer. Normally they'd feed on that deer for upwards of a week. Now they take a deer, they get maybe one good meal out of it. Along comes Mr. Black Bear and says, "Thank you, Mr. Lion," takes the
Right.
deer and consumes it. Mountain lion says, "Whatever," and goes and harvests another deer. So a mountain lion that would, in a, I don't want to say a perfect world, but in a unaltered ecosystem, would just be eating one deer a week. Instead, now they're upwards of 4 or 5 deer a week and feeding the local bear population. So another huge impact on deer herds by bear, let alone, you know, agriculture and all of us. You guys down in Southern California, you hear the stories of bears in downtown
Right.
Monrovia and all those foothill communities up here. I've lived in the same place for 23, 24 years. I live at 1,800 feet elevation. Never had a bear on my street. The last couple, 3 years, bears seen here regularly, black bear I'm talking.
Yeah,
So,
so
yeah,
now you're starting to pose an actual threat to the people that our government is supposed to protect, and I think you're just continuing to kind of show us how that web is spun within the ecosystem. You know, you stop being able to take one animal, it's going to affect the other. We experience that as a firearms community with legislation all the same, right? You have one piece of legislation that's obviously going to affect people in many other ways. All right. Well, that's going to kind of conclude our discussion today. Be sure to drop a like, leave us a comment, go ahead and subscribe to the channel. We want to keep these going. We need to let the YouTube people know that we still got action here. So you can also visit our website, that's crpa.org, to find all of this information as well. So we'll see you next week. Thanks for coming out.